My name is Emily Solsley. I'm the Assistant Director of Gift Planning. I'm privileged to work on this session with Kara Weander-Gasser, an affiliated fund coordinator. We also have Jeff Yost, NCS CEO, and a special peer mentor today, Richard Holmes from the UK. It's Gloucester in the United Kingdom. So with that, we'll go ahead and move right in to the next part. All right, Richard's on.
I'm going to pick that up. Thank you, Emily. It's lovely to be with you today. So as Emily said, I'm calling in from Gloucester in the UK. We are approximately, I had to look this up, we're 4,251 miles away from Lincoln. And it's 6 p.m. here in the evening. I know it's your lunchtime. Now, I know yesterday one of these webinars was Zoom bombed. There is a very, very strong possibility that we may get Zoom bombed today, but it will be by my children who are coming back home. Also, I have a dog that's in the office with me. So if the Amazon delivery guy turns up, again, there's a very strong possibility that the dog will bark. So bear with us. We're all kind of working through it. Here in the UK at the moment, we're under a stay-at-home order. So that means that we cannot leave the house apart from for essential shopping and for schools and work. So we're all having to adapt. Now, today we're going to be using a tool to try and make this as interactive as possible. We're going to be introducing a tool, but before we do that, I know that it's hard. I just want you to shake down, just shake yourself out, get ready, because we're going to try something new. Some people are doing this already. This is really cool. So we're going to be using a mobile phone if you're happy to do this. So grab another device. If you can't do it, don't worry, it doesn't matter. I'd like you to go onto your web browser and go to menti.com, and then it will ask you for a code, and your code today is 9319064. And we're asking a question: where are you today? And I can see people already putting some things into the Menti chat here. So we want to know where your hometown is. If you're in a neighborhood in Lincoln or one of the main cities, tell us which neighborhood you're in. And you can see on the screen now that our Menti word cloud is filling up fast. We've got people here calling from Grand Island, from McCook, from Ord, from, how am I going to pronounce that? They keep moving. I can't keep up with them all. Omaha, I know. The cowboy capital. Howes, have I pronounced that right? Coleridge, Chester, Johnstown, Missouri. Hey, there's loads of you from all over the state. It's lovely to have your company. I know that we've got 95 callers on the call today. Anyway, it's lovely to be with you all. We're going to launch straight into this by talking a little bit about the principles of ABCD, and I'll pass over to Kara.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Richard. We made Richard do that first breakout just because we wanted to hear his voice say all the names of the towns. So I think he did fairly well. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So this session, we're really going to dig into ABCD, asset-based community development. And, it's something you guys probably hear us talk about all the time, but I don't know if we all realize it's actually a worldwide community development practice. So this isn't just something we do in Nebraska. This is something that's happening across the globe. And so we're super excited that Richard's here today to help us and kind of share what's happening in the UK, and we can see how similar we all are. Go ahead, Casey. We're going to step to that next one. Let's just go over the basic tenets of ABCD. I know a lot of you have seen this slide before, but Richard, you want to kick us off on this one?
Yeah, sure. So these principles here are common across the world, really, across a network of global practitioners. We all focus on abundance and not scarcity. So by that, we know that our communities have loads of people with hidden talents and hidden skills. Sometimes we don't know what they are because we're not asking the right questions. But our job here as leaders within our communities is to go on a bit of a treasure hunt and to discover what's already there within our communities. And when we have those sorts of conversations and we find out what people care enough about to act on, it reveals a whole new world of opportunities. It's that moment when we've seen people get really excited about an idea that they've had and they want to take action on it. And of course, our role is then not to deliver that for that person, but to help them build their confidence and invite other people in and co-create something that is meaningful to them in their community. And of course, when you own something for yourself, it's more sustainable, and that change will stick in your community. It will stay there for the long run, and it's much more effective than getting things delivered by a local organisation or your local government. And what it means is that things become community-led and community-owned. And that's why we're really passionate and excited about ABCD.
So thank you, Richard. And Casey, you want to flip there? Perfect. So these are the rest of those pieces. Building relationships before you need them. I know you guys hear us talk about that all the time, but it is essential, right? When you have a relationship with someone, when you trust that person, you're starting at a different step in that relationship, and it's easier to get things done. And the story I'm going to share with you today really centers around this next one, that people belong through the gifts and their talents being received. So when we talk about asset mapping, or talking about the assets in our community, you know, those are really the gifts that people have that they can give. And when we uncover them, when we see them, and when we invite those folks to co-create with us and to bring their gifts to our community, that is really when we are making the magic of belonging happen. And of course, volunteer associations are very powerful and essential to build communities. And that kind of harkens back to that. It has to be local owned, local led, and those volunteer associations that are locally led are really a great way. And you guys, the community-based affiliate funds, obviously are also one of those powerful assets.
Cara, just to add into that, there's something that's really, really important. And that is when we hear that message of saying, you're needed, we need you in our community. It's really hard for people to turn that down and turn it away, because it says, I'm the one, I'm going to step forward. It's all about, it's me, I can offer something. And throughout the whole of this pandemic, people have wanted to be useful. And that's really, really critical to remember. So that thing around inviting people's gifts and saying we need you, particularly for those that are most marginalized in our community, is absolutely essential.
That's what I was going to say, Richard. And it's often easy for us to go to those folks maybe who we know right away, and that is an essential part, but also to think about asking them, who else should we be talking to, right? Continuing to expand your circles and to invite new folks to the table, because that's really when change starts happening, not only in your community, but in people's hearts.
Absolutely.
All right, are you guys ready to try that Menti again? I can't see you, so I hope it's working. We are going to ask you to do this. We're going to get you into breakout rooms, actually. So this one, you'll be in groups together. And we're going to ask you to share a time when you felt like you belonged. Thank you. Casey has put that into the chat. So think about not only when you belonged, but what was the outcome of that experience? How did you react or act because you felt like you belonged? If you guys could just chat about that for a little bit while you're together in your breakout rooms, you'll have about 6 minutes. And then if you want to just put some keywords in your Menti, we'll have one of those visuals when you come back.
That is awesome. Being invited, authentic relationships, and that's a good one in blue, had shared experience. Thank you all so much for sharing in our Menti. We're going to do it again in our next breakout session. So thanks. Go ahead and take over, Cara.
Thanks so much, Em. All right, so Richard and I are actually both going to tell you a story from our hometowns where we used ABCD, and we can see it in action. So just to be clear, the story I'm going to tell you is about Norfolk's 2020 Alleyway Art Project. And I was part of that not as an NCF staff member, but as a citizen of Norfolk. So when I'm telling this story, just to be clear, it's me as a person who lives in Norfolk, Nebraska. But today I am on the clock, so go back one slide, Casey. I have to show you the NCF slide. I get to, which really exemplifies all the things we're going to talk about in the Norfolk story, which is uncovering things that we don't see, right? Going out and finding things in our community, assets in our community that we didn't know were there. And not only doing that from one person's perspective, kind of, we've talked about that a little bit yesterday. Sometimes it's easy just to get it done, but really the best way to build community is to ask others to join in, because no one person can know all the resources. The more people you have, the more you know about your community and the more involved and engaged they are. All right, Casey. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this project we did in Norfolk. And it's been a project that has been talked about for a lot of years. Actually, I've been in a lot of conversations about this idea of getting murals in downtown Norfolk. And it just never got traction. Basically, it kept being a bunch of kind of leaders of organizations sitting around thinking, wouldn't it be nice if we had murals? How do we do that? Never once was I in a meeting where there was an artist and that conversation was had. At that point, what we were doing is we were talking to other communities. We were reaching out where there were murals, asking for their applications, their guidelines, trying to exemplify what was happening in other places. But we weren't looking inside. We weren't finding that abundance in our own place because we weren't looking. If you want to go ahead and click, Casey. So through the project, we really did some amazing things. Besides just getting paintings up on our walls, we also really made some amazing connections in our community. So what we did this time is when we started talking about it and started talking about, wouldn't it be nice to have murals? We said, well, what if we actually talk to the artists? What if we invite them to come in? Because as I said to that group that day was, I don't know how to paint a mural. Do any of you know how to paint a mural? And the answer was no. So we looked within, we started talking to folks that we did know, those relationships that were already in place. Because the people who had a vested interest in getting those paintings on the walls were not just the folks, the business owners, but also the artists who live here in town. And so, go ahead and click slides. When we started inviting people and talking to them, it really changed the whole project. Not only did we gain a whole lot of knowledge, but also we gained a whole lot of passion. So what we did is we talked to local artists and then we put out an invitation, with our local media. But we didn't put out an application or guidelines. What we said was we put out an invitation. We said, can you come and chat with us and have a conversation about co-creating Norfolk's future? And that changed everything, right? It went from us talking about it and nothing ever happening to really getting 3 murals up in about 4 months, which was insane. So when we put that invitation out, we had 35 artists respond. We had 24 people who came to an official meeting, right? We said it was a conversation, but it was a meeting in a way. But when we got there, we just said, we shared with them what the idea we had, what the passion we had about it. And then we said, how do we do that? We had a conversation then, what will you need? What can we bring to bear in our community to get some murals up on the walls? So it was crazy when we had that authentic invitation of co-creation, right? Instead of they didn't show up at the meeting and we said, here's an application, put your name, fill it out, and we'll let you know what's happening. We invited them to sit down with us and say, how are we going to do this together for our community? So we did ask them to write proposals so that we'd have documentation. And we'll flip that, Casey. What we did then is we got a bunch of ideas back. We took those downtown. We met with local business people, and we just made those connections for them. We put this idea out there, and it was amazing, the folks who came to help. All of the paint was donated from local businesses. We had a local business donate a lift to help, the artists get up and down. Someone came in and did the spray washing beforehand. I mean, it really was a community effort, and the community is benefiting from that. And the neat things are, again, like we got 3 amazing murals, but also what happened is our artists have a new sense of community that really didn't exist before. They have a real sense of pride that they helped co-create our downtown, right? And And the folks in our community understand that there is this abundance of artists who want to help create the future of Norfolk. So the other piece that happened with that is when we're looking at that cherished piece, but the Norfolk Elkhorn Valley History Museum is going down and doing histories with all of the artists because they're respecting, they're like, in 25 years, these things are going to still be here and people are going to want to know about it. So it's just changed a lot of relationships. Things like that have been happening out of it that we didn't plan or expect, right? It's that abundance and goodness just coming out because we put those ABCD to work. So that is the Norfolk story, pretty much a story of co-creation and how we brought that all together. Now we're going to have another Menti. So you guys going to get dropped back out into groups.
That's not the right code though. So we are going to broadcast the code out to you in chat. I'm going to do that right now.
Okay. So we have new codes. So don't look that code, use the code in the chat. And in your groups, we're going to ask you to just talk about co-creation. When have you either invited folks to co-create or have you ever been invited to be a co-creator? Talk a little bit about how that felt different than when people just asked you to come in and participate, right? It's a little bit different when you're actually asking them to come in, help design it together with you. All right, have an enjoyable conversation, everyone. We'll see you in a little bit.
These answers are rolling in and they are awesome. We don't have everyone back yet, but I'm just gonna keep this up so you can all enjoy the movement, the answers, the info.
For sharing, everybody. Bye.
We've got about 60 back, 70, almost 80. We're almost there. Thank you all for putting some answers in the Menti. I hope your conversations were really wonderful, very meaningful. Your answers here are just stunning and humbling. See if I can scroll. It's not letting me at all. It's still going. So developing the KBR Leadership Academy, creating a music festival, putting on a dream switch, getting a new building to house the fire department as someone who served on the fire board. And I love that phrase, co-creating, nothing about us without us. And I think that is probably a good takeaway from this session on belonging. Inspired pride, working for newspapers. I want to know who that is. Oh, I could read these all day and I want to hear all these stories behind them, but I think we're going to go ahead and move into Richard's story.
Thanks, Emily. I'm hoping that we might be able to share those, actually. I'm sure we can get a summary of them and post them out to participants. If you can hear a bit of noise in the background, that's because my family have just come back from the end of their busy day. So no doubt one of the children will be knocking on the door in a minute going, "Dada, Dada." So I do apologise for that. As Cara was saying, art projects are a really interesting thing that can bring people together. Before I go into this presentation, I just wanted to share a little story in Gloucester. It was one resident who had this vision for creating a rainbow street, and she managed to convince the other 42 houses in their street to paint their houses a different colour. So if you go on Google and type in Rainbow Street in Gloucester, have a look and there'll be loads of videos and pictures of it, and it looks absolutely amazing. But it just came down to one resident having a dream and having a vision and knocking on doors and chatting to people. So one of the things that I've picked up from Jeff in particular over in Nebraska was this phrase, and I'm sure he would say he's taken it from somewhere else anyway, but build relationships before you need them. And this particular picture here came from a group of residents who had an idea to create a living advent calendar. And that's when you identify 24 homes in the street. Each home takes a day of Advent and they decorate their window, and then on their day they switch their light on and it creates a walking trail down the street so people go and see each other. And some people get really into it and they have a light switch on party, which is what you can see in front of us. And the important thing about these things is that on the surface, they can seem unimportant, but actually what's happening in them is you're building the relationships before you need them. Now, this photo was taken in December 2019. Little did any of this group know at the time that they would need their neighbours more than ever before, because there was a global pandemic that was just around the corner. If we move on to the next slide there, Casey. I'm just going to talk a little bit about our community response to COVID-19. So Gloucester is a fairly small city in the UK. We have about a population of about 120,000. Now, because we had built those relationships before you needed them, we were able to respond quite quickly during COVID-19. So before the UK government announced that we were going to be encountering a national lockdown, we printed 57,000 leaflets, one for every house in our city, to post through every door to get neighbours connected with each other, because we could see quite clearly that the best route for getting through this was through neighbourly support. And if you weren't connected to your neighbours, now is the time to do it. So we delivered 57,000 leaflets and delivered them through a network of local organisations and residents. And what emerged was we had a street champion network of around 500 people. And it was those 500, along with their friends and their neighbours, that were the people that did shopping for each other. They collected medicines, as well as other things that kind of kept people entertained. Like we had bags of play for the kids and arts and craft packs that went into old people's homes. As the restrictions started to relax, we were in a position where we could talk to people out in the street and have a chat with them. And what started to happen is when you're chatting and you're sat outside homes and you're sat outside kind of just finding out how people are, you get into a different sort of conversation and people build trust between each other. And there was one particular lady who said, I've been in lockdown for 3 months. I've put on a lot of weight. I think we've all put on a lot of weight during lockdown over here. And I really want to lose some weight. So our community builder, Karina, said, well, let's go and have a chat to some of the other neighbours in this area and find out if they too share your interest in having a fitness group, which is what this particular lady wanted. So they started knocking on doors, having a chat to people, finding out who else was interested. And they managed to bring a small group of people together who wanted to do outdoor exercise, because that was the safest way in which we could reduce the COVID-19 transmissions. And also, when you're out on a green open space, as you can see here in the picture, other neighbours can see what's happening, and then that invites them out of their homes as well. So essentially what we were trying to do is connect residents around their passions and their interests, and have a conversation with them about what would help your community recover from this current situation. So essentially all our community builder was doing, and this is a paid role that we have, but they just went out and listened to people, spoke to them, not about the problems, not about the deficits in their community, but what was important to them, what was their passions and their interests. So if we move on to this next one, that particular fitness group, they did their fitness session, and they were the community builder also connected them to a grant, one of our local grant funders as well, who paid for that fitness instructor. So what's critical in that is they held all the power, they held the control, they were the people that were making the decisions. Now that group, after they did their fitness sessions, they then went on to go and have coffee afterwards. And one of the members of that group said, my daughter has been trying to get me to use a smartphone for years. And of course, during COVID-19, we've all relied on video technology. And this lady had been resisting it. But it was that group of people who she was having coffee with that gave her the confidence to say, okay, I'll accept the phone, because they were the people that were going to teach her. So it wasn't a government course. It wasn't run by an institution. It was a group of neighbours who said, we can teach each other how to use our mobile phones. And what then happened is they set up an informal IT club that again met at the community centre. And initially they started teaching each other how to Zoom and how to FaceTime and use that sort of technology. And now they're learning how to do online shopping. But it's really just very relaxed. It's only a group of about 5 older people who come together every week, and they're just learning from each other. So I guess the point of that story is that you can't predetermine what the outcomes are of these community conversations. People will reveal the things that they need in their community. So we kind of have to expect unexpected results. That's the only given in all of this, that what will happen, we can't predict. So as organizations that are trying to stimulate more resident-led activity, we have to learn to dance. Now, in using that word dance, what I mean is that we're having to learn to take 2 steps forward and then 1 step back, and discerning when is our help needed and when is it not? When do we just need to completely get out of the way? And that's really difficult for a lot of people in paid roles and in organizations, because often we want to jump in, we want to do things for people because we're human beings. But we have to learn that if we're going to build the capacity of other people in their community, we have to learn to basically step out the way or come alongside. So our role changes. And it's a little bit like when you're bringing up kids. You know, you want your kids to be independent. You want them to thrive in society. So you're not going to do everything for them. They have to learn their own lessons. So in the same way, that's how we're trying to work with our communities in Gloucester. We're going to move into a breakout group now. And we want you to start dreaming. This is a bit where you turn up your dream switch. And this is a bit where we try and have a bit more of a call to action. So hopefully Cara and I have tried to give you, sorry, I've called her Cara, it's Cara, it's my accent, sorry. Cara and I have been giving you examples of resident-led action, of how communities have been inspiring each other and doing things where they live. And now we want to invite you into small group sessions where you can start to think about, what are the things that we could do where we live? What are our actions? What's our story going to be in our hometown? So I think Casey's going to move us into small group discussions, and then when we come back, we're going to feed them into the chat function here on Zoom. So have a great conversation, feel inspired, but also be specific and think about the practical things that you can do where you live that can make your hometown a great place to live.
So since we didn't do a mentee for this breakout session, I would love to hear from some of you the answer to your question. How are you going to invite others to co-create and be specific? So if you'd like to share it in the chat, please do so. If you would like to unmute and speak up, you can do that as well. So we've got just a couple minutes to chat about this.
Well, Emily, I'd love to know who came up with the coolest idea. What was the thing that most excited you from that conversation?
Well, we were inspired, Richard, by your idea of going door to door and asking, because we were talking we were just getting revved up at the end of our breakout about election season and politicians showing up and asking for your vote, but where are they 2 years ago, or where are they 2 years from now? And we issue these surveys in communities to find out what people need, but it's the usual suspects who fill it out, when we might get a very different response about what our community is looking for if we were outside of pandemic, actually going door to door. So thank you for those words of inspiration. Our group really talked quite a bit about that.
That'd be great. It'd be lovely to know how you guys get on as well. What sort of ideas people in your hometown have. And yeah, it'd be great to hear back from you.
And Becky, do you want to share your blanket story? It sounds like it's being called.
I will be very concise. So I talked about being educated by the young people in our community in Lincoln. I'm the co-founder of a nonprofit, and we do many things within the community and beyond. But one thing that we started doing in 2017 was doing a blanket drive for Title I schools, because many of the students we were working alongside were saying, we'd like a blanket for Christmas. We'd like a bedding for Christmas. However, we weren't very smart at the time, and we weren't really listening, because as we started to listen more intently to our youth, we understood that they were also interested in leading the program curating the program, and making blankets and distributing them amongst their schools themselves. So over the course of time, our blanket program has gone to a not perfect model to a much better model where students are actually the co-creators and the leaders who design the program in their schools, distribute blankets in their schools, and now are the ones in certain cases, which we hope becomes eventually a large case, making the blankets in their schools. So they're doing everything from distributing fabric to delivering blankets to their peers. And we just had to learn to get out of the way.
That's cool. Thank you, Becky. What a great story. And that getting out of the way is so important. But it's not completely stepping back either. It's just you're coming alongside. The relationship is different, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And anyone else want to offer any inspiring ideas that they have? Because remember, you guys are kind of co-coaching each other. You're teaching each other. So anything else that has really excited or inspired you?
So I think we have time for one more. And Dakota, are you willing to share?
Sure. So I'm from Chester, Nebraska, and in Chester we have what's called the Chester Community Club. It's an organization that's been around for a while, but it recently just got kickstarted within the last 5 years. And the main thing the Chester Community Club does is they plan an annual celebration for the village of Chester every summer called Chester Fest. And unfortunately, due to COVID-19, we had to end up canceling that this summer. And so I'm the only youth member on our board. And after that got canceled, I'm like, guys, we should still do something. Let's have a drive-in movie. Let's plan something. And the adults kind of looked at me and said, I don't know, that's a lot of work. Let's just not do that. So they kind of shot my idea down. However, I still wanted to do something. And so I reached out to the very few teens we have in the small village of Chester. But I found 17 of them that were willing to get together, plan this drive-in movie. And we were actually able to pull it off. It was completely planned and staffed completely by the teens of Chester. We had it in July and we had close to 300 people show up, which was really cool. And we raised enough money to be able to start our own club and organization to keep doing youth-centric events within the city of Chester, which was really fun. But I think it was cool because the teens of our town have never really been asked to get involved. And once I did ask them, they were more excited about the drive-in movie than I even was. And they want to do something next. And so I'm ready for to see what they can come up with.
That's awesome, Dakota. That's amazing,
Thank you. Mate. I also want to ask one more person to share. Thank you, Dakota. And Marilyn, did you have a good example you wanted to share?
My example was a Beautify Howells program. So it's been something in the back of my mind for quite some time. And you know, you go to cities and they have this cute little lampposts, and then they got the flower pots that look so cute, and it just looks so inviting. And it's been one of my dreams to get that going. And to co-create, I thought it would be just so wonderful to ask the youth, maybe to like the FFA program or the FCCLA program, to come in and help with it and plant and look after it. And then to invite the elderly in our community, because since the COVID has hit Howells or in the community or everywhere, then the elderly have not had much to do. So I thought it would be really fun to ask the older ladies to come in and deadhead the flowers and look over the youth to make sure they're doing a good job, make sure plants are getting watered. And it would be a co-creation of the youth and the elderly and pull it all together and beautify Howells at the same time. I'm complete.
Thank you so much. All right, we're going to move into some closing thoughts from Jeff before we take a few more questions that are in the chat. So Jeff, take it away. Casey, if you've got the PowerPoint.
All right, can you hear me? Okay. I just wanted to reference us back to a couple of the slides that Richard and Kara took us to. So abundance, opportunities, those are pretty obvious, right? The one that always makes sense to us, but the one we frequently see that doesn't happen as much as we'd like, is truly inviting people to co-create it with us. So as opposed to having it all figured out and just asking people to help, how do we be a little more open-ended on the front end to invite people to actually create it? And that's why I love the Norfolk story, is the artists became co-creators, and I think they ended up with a completely different set of products and murals because of the co-creation than just saying, you guys are painters, we want you to come paint this. They weren't just painting, they were actually sharing their artistic talent and their creativity to come up with something more powerful, that they have a much stronger sense of ownership. And that's, so when it's community led, then it's community owned. When it's community owned, we know it's much more likely to be sustainable than if something is just done to us or done for us. You know, the biggest word we have in NCF is with, and all of our practice is with people, not to people or for people. So as you're thinking through your invitations, how do you do it so it's truly an invitation to do something with someone else as opposed to them or for them? The second bullet here is the other one that I wanted to reference back to. And again, it's, I think we all know it, but we often don't sort of have this come through in our day-to-day lives. We get to going fast and then we do it other ways. But people belong through having their gifts and talents received and appreciated. So the invitation is incredibly important, but the invitation to give is what helps people have a sense that they're important, that they're part of the group, that they feel welcome. And then people feel a sense of trust, a sense of efficacy, and certainly a sense of camaraderie, which then makes it mutual. And that's the thing that we're always looking for in community, is how do we have things that are mutually beneficial? Well, people need to have a great sense of being welcome and a great sense of belonging in order to really pursue mutuality. So Casey, would you go ahead and flip to the later slides there? Richard, Kara, are there a couple things you guys wanted to share before I take us to a new slide?
I guess I would just add in, if you're building relationships before you need them, then stuff has to be fun. People will engage in things that they genuinely enjoy, like Dakota's drive-through movies. People took part because they loved it, because they wanted to be there. And there's something that's different from that and doing something that's worthy. The worthiness still has value, but doing the fun things will engage a whole different group of the population or the community that you wouldn't otherwise engage with. So that's why tapping into what people really care about, what they're passionate about, is so important. There's a phrase that a colleague of ours, Jim Deers, uses, which is, why have a meeting when you can have a party? People are more likely to turn up to fun stuff than they will do to your local council meeting.
Thank you, Richard. That, you know, my eight-year-old once told me that, Mom, you should call them parties and give them cake, and then they'll always come. Don't call them meetings. I also just wanted to say this real quick, especially, you know, when you start co-creating, what happens is there's so much abundance that comes into you like a fire hose that sometimes it's overwhelming, right? And it changes maybe the direction you think you're going. But if any of you guys were on that session yesterday about this, saw that sponge and egg, right? When your FAC is strong and you can take in all those new inputs and go with the flow, but yet you have your shape and you know what you're doing. So it's a great balance, and your coordinator loves to help you think through that. If you want to talk to them about that. Jeff, did you get your slide up there?
Yep, it's on here now. And actually there was something put in the chat, and I want to call on another longtime friend. Janet Topolsky's been a friend of the Nebraska Community Foundation, a friend of mine for close to 25 years. She's in Washington, D.C. She works with the Aspen Institute Community Strategies Group. And Janet, you put something in the chat that I'd love for you to to take a moment and explain to people, if you would, please.
Sure. Well, you know, and I heard someone say this earlier. Hi, by the way, hi, Nebraska. But, you know, this phrase has been around, especially in, I would say people fighting against poverty, you know, for a long time, about the design, you know, how is policy designed, and the phrase nothing about us without us. And it's a very, very strong phrase. But I'm telling you, a couple of years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I was in a room where someone who was like the parent in a poor family said, if it's for us without us, it's not about us, right? And which I think is a great rewrite about that, because, you know, if you think you're doing something for someone and they're not involved, it's about you, not about them, right? And so if you really want to start involving people who are not involved, or including people who are not included, they got to be at the table. So I don't use nothing about us without us anymore, because I think the other quote is better. If it's for us without us, it's not about us, right? There you go.
Thank you, my friend. That was awesome. Casey, there's one more slide here. So much of what we're trying to do in Nebraska as it relates to people attraction is really helping individuals and our communities have a more positive, self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's why we've taken on building unrestricted community endowments, because really, if you can build an unrestricted endowment for your home place, you can raise money for anything. And the reason we're doing that is to get to this. It's why I use an asset-based approach. It's to help people find power. It's to help people build power, and then we can exercise that new power to create a more equitable place, to create a more welcoming place, to create a place where people feel that sense of belonging, because then it becomes home for everybody. And I think in 2020, more than ever, all of us appreciate, and I think all of us are lucky enough to have a deep appreciation for how lucky we are to have homes and to have support systems. This has been a really, really tough year for millions and millions of people. And we want to exercise our power to create a more equitable and just world for lots and lots of folks. So Casey, would you go to the next one? So the connection we want to make here, and this is something that Carlos Barcinas uses, and Carlos is with us, so I'll ask Carlos to see if he has anything to say about it as well. But as we're thinking about being a continuous improvement organization, as we're constantly thinking about how does the network get better, how do each of us individually and all of us collectively get better, I think it's incredibly important to have a growth mindset. So exposure, education, experience, empathy. And lots of times we get a little bit of information, so we're exposed and we try to jump to empathy, and it seldom works. And so much of what the Nebraska Community Foundation Network can be helpful with is, once we have some exposure, some questions, how do we learn more about it? How do we have some experiences where we're actually walking a mile in somebody else's shoes? This is another big element of creating a sense of belonging, is actually having a sense of empathy for people whose life experiences and maybe even whose perspectives are just very different than your own. And that's a big part of community building. Carlos, is there anything else you would like to share with us as it relates to a growth mindset?
I would just say that in the times that we're living, one of the things that I keep reminding myself is, one, pause, breathe, and be present. We all need each other. You know, that's one thing that I'm so glad to be part of this network, because I feel that I belong in the relationships that I have with all of you, and it challenges me to reach out to others and say, wow, we need you where you are. We need you with your gifts, and you have a place here. And just remember, it's a journey, non-closure. Keep on walking.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carlos. We have reserved some time for question and answer. So if people want to put those in the chat, or people just want to unmute themselves and ask, or if you have an observation you'd like to share, please do that as well.
We've gotten a great question from Michael, and he wrote it in two ways. It's for Richard. It has to do with division and co-creation. So I'm going to go try to find the first one. What, if any, were the local community divisions that were broken down as a result of the COVID-19 response, generational, gender, race? And how has this new trust in and care for each other been further nurtured to help in the new lockdown present in place across England?
Good question. I mean, I think certainly we've seen those communities that are perhaps financially poorer have been disproportionately affected by COVID. But what we've also seen in those communities is a stronger sense of community spirit and support. So right at the start of lockdown, we pulled together a WhatsApp group of city and community leaders, which was a network of about 50 of us, I think. And to be totally honest with you, that was the first time that people had really started to collaborate with each other. People knew each other before, but they probably weren't friends. But I think what COVID did is brought a very close-knit network together that enabled resources to move from one community to another. So people helped each other a lot more. There are still divisions in our city. I can't deny that. I think people have had more empathy for each other, though. The COVID situation has been more of a leveler, but I'm sure you've heard that phrase that we're in the same storm, but we're in different boats. I think that is still true. But what I would say is people have been more considerate and more responsive to each other's needs. It's not perfect, but it's still something that we're working through. And in fact, there's a situation that we're currently trying to figure out, which is, again, how we reach our neighbours and our friends in the BAME community who are more isolated because of language differences, and how do we reach out and include each other. So we're trying to figure that out through our Street Champion network at the moment, and how we can find those people that are perhaps the most isolated in society, so they can get the help that they need. Yeah, I appreciate I haven't completely answered that, but as ever, as in your communities, the situation is complex, and we're all in that mess together, trying to figure it out to be able to support each other. Was there a second part to that question, Emily? I can't remember.
Well, Michael, did you need any further clarification?
Hi, Richard. I just was about to put in the chat, Richard, thank you very much for your honest answer. Because sometimes when you ask that question, everything is now rosy in the garden. And I like the last bit around the BME community. Yeah. You can recognize that I'm not located in Nebraska. I can. I'm a whole lot closer to you.
Yeah, you are.
just across the water in NI. And the BME community is definitely one that we struggle with as well. They have their own cultures. We give out food parcels, our community groups give out food parcels, government give out food parcels, only to find that the food that they were giving out, some of the BME community couldn't actually use. So yeah, the intention was good, but actually the co-creation with the BME community would have allowed that not to have happened. So I think we're still learning, but thank you for your really honest response. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, cultural, finding food packages that are culturally appropriate has been a real challenge, particularly right at the start. I will share one story though, because there was a group of people from the Black Afro-Caribbean community in Gloucester who they started cooking, and they started cooking for their own community. And what they've done now is they've been cooking and freezing meals that can then be distributed to their part of the community. And of course, other parts of the community are also saying, well, these meals are delicious, can we try some of them? And that's bringing people into a different sort of conversation again. So there are some local solutions, but there's still loads more work to be done. But it's certainly a challenging and interesting journey, but it's bringing us into conversation with each other. You know, if someone says that food package isn't culturally appropriate, that says to us, well, perhaps we need to improve our own understanding of other cultures that we live with within our community. And that can only be a good thing, that we get brought into conversation with each other.
Emily, I was just going through the chat, and I thought Matt Sainert had some interesting insights. Matt, would you be willing to share with us what you were putting in the chat?
Jeff, what were you speaking about specifically?
Your thoughts on mentoring in particular, Matt?
Oh, yeah, we had some good experiences where one of the questions in the breakout was, how do you get other people involved? And I think recognizing people in the community with talents, with specific talents, and then getting them, asking them. And then a lot of times they don't understand the process. So I think that a mentor can help them through the process, but help them bring out their talents for our community. And I think that everybody, we talk about that helps develop more leadership. That's all.
Thank you, Matt. Dale's got one more question. It might take more than 2 minutes to answer. So I don't know if you want to answer that in the chat, Richard, or out loud.
Was that the Brexit question?
Yeah.
Thanks. So obviously Brexit has created divides within our country, but I guess you guys are experiencing a different sort of politics as well. So it is really challenging. I think that there are such a diversity of views, and there are waves of our population that do feel marginalized and feel left out. And that's why, in part, the Brexit vote happened. I'd like to think we're kind of coming to a place now where there is a sense of acceptance, and that we're figuring out together what will a new Great Britain look like. But there's still tension, and there will be for many, many years. And anyone that knows the UK context will understand what's kind of playing out here. But yeah, it's challenge. Our political situation is certainly different and challenging. And I know you guys are also in a similar position following your recent election as well. So it'll be interesting. It's now about how we come together and focus on what we can share together, focus on our commonalities in that shared space, and rebuild those relationships with our neighbours and rebuild that common ground where we can enjoy our communities and our lives together.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well,
Richard, can you share with us just a couple examples of common ground and common space? Because I think it's easy enough to say what you just said, and then it's hard for many of us to try to figure out, okay, what is that? What are those commonalities? And that's a great opportunity to hear from somebody in a different context, if you would, please.
Yeah, so I again, it comes back to asking those questions about what do you care enough about that you're prepared to act on. So whether that's the fitness group that you saw in Elmbridge, or we have a men's group in a place called Quedgley, which is a men's shed where you can kind of tinker with woodwork. And I think it's in those places that, irrespective of your political views, that you can kind of come together and focus on something together that isn't about politics, but it is about that shared love of that thing that you're doing together. And I do genuinely believe that when you're in a deeper relationship with the people around you, that you've kind of got a sense of love and care for those people. So therefore you have more respect for differences in political views. And they kind of go, you know, yeah, I respect what you're saying and I understand it. I don't agree, but that's okay. We can still share a pint together. We can still share a beer, and we're there for each other. And I think that's the sort of society that I would like to see here in our city. And I would hope that's the sort of society that you guys would like in Nebraska, one where it's built on love and care and compassion and respect. We all have different views, and we just need to get to that common ground where it's okay to talk about them.